The doors to the Grand Assembly Hall opened with a sound like distant thunder, and Ambassador Marcus Webb stepped into a space so vast it seemed to swallow the concept of distance itself. The chamber stretched upward into darkness. Its walls formed from living crystal that pulsed with the combined bioelectric signatures of 2,000 different species. Platforms hovered at dozens of levels, each one holding delegates whose civilizations measured their history in millions of years. Some looked like they belonged underwater. Others appeared to be made of pure energy contained in geometric shapes. A few defied description entirely, existing in ways that made human eyes water to perceive. Marcus walked alone across the kilometer-long floor toward the center platform, his footsteps echoing in the massive space. He wore a simple black suit, no weapons, no ceremonial armor, nothing to indicate he represented a species that had just humiliated the most powerful military force in the known galaxy. Above him, thousands of eyes tracked his movement. Some held curiosity. Most held contempt. The Supreme Arbiter waited at the central dais, its form shifting between states of matter as it observed the human approach. The being was ancient when Earth's first cells divided in primordial oceans. Its species had mapped every star in the galaxy before humans discovered fire. You are Marcus Webb, representative of the species that calls itself humanity. The Arbiter's voice came from everywhere and nowhere, translated instantly into frequencies Marcus could comprehend. I am. You understand why you have been summoned before this council? Marcus stopped at the designated mark on the floor. Energy fields hummed to life around him, scanning, analyzing, ready to disintegrate him if he made a threatening move. He smiled up at the assembled powers of the galaxy. You're upset that we destroyed your fleets. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. A delegate from the Korthian Empire, a massive creature covered in metallic plates, rose from its platform. Upset? You primitive barbarians committed acts of war against the Galactic Collective. You destroyed 47 patrol groups. You obliterated the 4th Enforcement Fleet, 300 vessels and 50,000 souls, gone in minutes. 50,017, actually, Marcus corrected. We counted. The chamber erupted in outrage. Translation matrices overloaded trying to keep up with the flood of alien languages, all expressing variations of shock and fury. The Arbiter raised several appendages, and silence fell like a physical force. You admit to these acts? Absolutely. We also destroyed your mining colony on Kepler 442, disabled the surveillance network you built around our solar system, and eliminated the infiltration teams you sent to our major cities. Oh, and we found the genetic weapons you were developing specifically to target human biology. We destroyed those facilities too. A delegate that resembled a floating mass of tentacles spoke in harmonics that made the air vibrate. The collective offered your species a place among the civilized worlds. We offered you technology, protection, and purpose. And you responded with violence? Marcus laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. You offered us slavery with better marketing. Let me read from your integration proposal, just so everyone here remembers what you actually wanted. He pulled a small device from his pocket, and every weapon system in the chamber locked onto him. Relax, it's just a data pad. He read from the screen. Mandatory genetic modification to enhance workplace efficiency. Translation, you wanted to biologically engineer us into better workers. Forced population redistribution to industrial sectors. You were going to turn Earth into a labor camp. Cultural integration program requiring abandonment of all pre-contact languages, religions, and social structures. You were going to erase everything that makes us human. Standard procedure, said a crystalline being whose voice sounded like breaking ice. All primitive species undergo integration. It is for their own benefit. Whose benefit exactly? Marcus asked. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've built a galaxy-spanning empire on the backs of species you've conquered and reprogrammed to serve you. The Arbiter's form solidified into something almost threatening. We have brought order to chaos. Before the collective, this galaxy was torn by endless wars. We ended that. We created a civilization that has lasted 100,000 years. You created a prison and called it peace, Marcus replied. And when we said no, you sent your fleets to force the issue. So we defended ourselves. A delegate whose species looked like animated smoke drifted closer. Defended? You have one planet. No colonies? No interstellar infrastructure? The collective spans 40,000 worlds. We have resources beyond your comprehension. You cannot possibly believe you can stand against us. We already have, Marcus said calmly. Your fourth fleet came to blockade Earth. We gave them one chance to leave. They refused. So we removed them. How? The word came from multiple delegates simultaneously. The fourth fleet had quantum shielding, reality anchors, weapons that could crack planets. How did a species that barely achieved fusion power a century ago destroy them? Marcus looked around the chamber, meeting the gaze of as many delegates as he could. Because you've been the dominant force in this galaxy for so long, you've forgotten what it means to actually fight for survival. Your tactics haven't evolved in millennia. You rely on overwhelming force because you've never had to be clever. You've never had to improvise. You've never had to fight an enemy that adapts. He gestured to the assembled species. Every civilization here was either absorbed into the collective or built under its shadow. You've all been playing by the same rules for 100,000 years. Humanity has been fighting itself for our entire existence. We've had thousands of wars. We've developed weapons to counter every possible threat because we were always the biggest threat to ourselves. When you sent your fleet, we didn't see invincible warships. We saw targets with predictable behavior patterns. Impossible, hissed a serpentine delegate. You could not have defeated the fourth fleet with primitive weapons. Who said our weapons were primitive? Marcus asked. You assumed we were technologically inferior, because we don't have your fancy, faster-than-light drives or your quantum computers? But here's the thing about humans. We're really good at taking existing concepts and weaponizing them in ways you never imagined. Your quantum shields? They rely on probability manipulation. We just collapsed the probability wave functions in ways that made your shields work against you. Your reality anchors? We fed them conflicting data until they tore themselves apart. Your planet-cracking weapons? We turned them into shaped charges and sent them right back at you. The Arbiter leaned forward. Even if this is true, you cannot hope to stand against the full might of the collective. We have resources you cannot match. We have weapons you cannot comprehend. Maybe, Marcus agreed. But you also have something else, secrets, lots of them. He held up the datapad again. For the past 6 months, humanity has been inside your quantum communication network. We've accessed your military databases, your political communications, your scientific research. We know everything about how the collective really operates. The chamber fell silent. The only sound was the hum of the energy fields and the pulse of the crystal walls. You're bluffing, the Arbiter said, but there was uncertainty in its voice. Am I? Let me share some highlights. The rebellion on Vaxxer 7 that you crushed 15 years ago? You told the galaxy they were terrorists. They were actually protesting forced genetic modification. The resource extraction on the Pelion cluster? You're taking 90% of their output and giving them just enough to survive. The military academy on Zenthor Prime? You're not training defenders. You're creating enforcers to keep your vassal worlds in line. Marcus looked around the chamber. Many delegates were shifting uncomfortably. Others were staring at the Arbiter with new understanding. Every species in this chamber believes they're part of something greater. But you're just cogs in a machine that grinds up civilizations and spits out obedient servants. We have all the proof. Every atrocity, every lie, every manipulation. And if you don't leave Earth alone, we're going to share it with everyone. The Arbiter's form began to fluctuate wildly. You would destabilize the entire galaxy? Billions would die in the chaos. Then don't make us do it, Marcus said quietly. Leave Earth alone. Let humanity develop on our own terms. Pull back your fleets, your spies, your infiltrators, or watch your empire collapse as every suppressed species learns the truth about what you really are. No civilization has ever defied the collective and survived, the Arbiter said. What makes you believe you will be different? Marcus smiled that cold, dangerous smile again. Because we're not trying to survive your empire. We're offering you the chance to survive us. The device in his hand began to glow. Displays throughout the chamber flickered and died. Then new images appeared. Secret files, hidden communications, evidence of crimes spanning millennia. The countdown had begun, and the galaxy was about to learn that the newest species in the collective was also the most dangerous. The emergency session of the Galactic Collective Security Council convened in a state of barely controlled panic. High Admiral Torvin of the 7th Fleet stood before the assembled military commanders, his 4 arms gesturing at the tactical display that dominated the center of the war room. The display showed nothing. Vast regions of space where the 4th Fleet should have been monitoring humanity's solar system now contained only debris fields and unanswered distress calls. They appeared from nowhere, Torvin said, his voice carrying the weight of a commander who had just witnessed the impossible. Our sensors detected no approach vectors, no energy signatures, no quantum disturbances. One moment, our fleet was maintaining standard blockade formation around the 3rd planet. The next moment, they were under attack from weapons we couldn't identify. Fleet Coordinator Kellis, a being composed of crystalline structures that refracted light in patterns that represented thought, pulsed with skeptical colors. You commanded 300 vessels? The 4th Fleet possessed technology that has conquered 1,000 worlds. How does a species that barely mastered nuclear fusion destroy such a force? Torvin's primary eyes dimmed with something that looked like shame. Because we underestimated them. Completely and catastrophically. He manipulated the controls, and the display shifted to show recovered sensor data from the battle. The images were fragmented, corrupted by some kind of interference that the collective's best technicians still could not explain. The humans didn't attack with missiles or energy weapons, not in any form we recognized. They used our own technology against us. They somehow accessed our quantum communication network and fed false data directly into our targeting systems. Ships began firing on each other, believing they were engaging enemy vessels. By the time we realized what was happening, we had lost 30% of the fleet to friendly fire. That's impossible, growled Commander Braxis. A warrior species that had served the collective for 20,000 years. The quantum network is encrypted with mathematics that would take longer than the age of the universe to crack. Unless you already know the encryption keys, Torvin replied, which the humans apparently did. They weren't just in our communication network. They were in our computers, our tactical systems, everything. They had been there for months, learning how we operate, mapping our protocols and waiting. The war room fell silent. The implications were staggering. If humanity had compromised the most secure systems in the galaxy, then nothing was safe. What about the reality anchors? Kellis asked. Those systems operate on principles that prevent technological interference. Torvin's expression darkened further. The humans turned them into bombs. They fed the anchors conflicting reality parameters until the systems couldn't reconcile the data. The resulting paradox explosions took out another 40 ships. He pulled up more data, and the commanders watched in growing horror as the battle unfolded in accelerated playback. Human vessels appeared on screen, but they looked nothing like anyone expected. They were smaller than collective warships, almost primitive in construction. But they moved in ways that should have been impossible, changing vectors without visible propulsion, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. Stealth technology? Someone asked. We don't think so, Torvin said. Our analysts believe they're using localized quantum tunneling. They're not moving through normal space. They're essentially teleporting short distances, making them impossible to target with conventional weapons. The laws of physics don't allow for controlled quantum tunneling on that scale, Kellis protested. The humans apparently didn't read that part of the textbook, Torvin replied bitterly. They're doing things with technology that should be impossible. Not because they're more advanced than us, but because they approach problems from completely different angles. They don't have our limitations because they never learned our rules. He gestured to another display. This is what they did to our flagship. The Eternal Domination, the most powerful vessel in the Fourth Fleet, equipped with planet-cracking weapons and shields that could withstand a supernova. The display showed the massive warship, 5 kilometers of advanced technology and overwhelming firepower. Then it showed what happened next. A single human vessel, barely 100 meters long, approached the flagship. It didn't fire weapons. It didn't launch missiles. It simply broadcast a signal directly into the Domination's computer core. They gave it a choice, Torvin said quietly. Surrender or be destroyed. Our captain refused, of course. He initiated the planet-cracking weapon, intending to destroy Earth from orbit. The weapon powered up. The humans sent another signal. And then this happened. The flagship's weapon systems activated, but instead of firing outward, they turned inward. The planet-cracking technology designed to shatter worlds tore the Eternal Domination apart from the inside. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. They hacked a planet killer and made it commit suicide, Braxis whispered. In the middle of battle, while we were actively trying to stop them. It gets worse, Torvin continued. After the flagship was destroyed, the remaining ships attempted to retreat. The humans let them. They could have destroyed the entire fleet, but they chose to send a message instead. They allowed exactly 13 ships to escape. 13, because that's an unlucky number in human culture. They wanted us to know this was a warning, not their full capability. Kellis's crystalline structure flickered with colors that represented deep concern. If this is their warning, what is their actual military capability? Unknown, Torvin admitted. And that's what terrifies me. They destroyed 75% of the Fourth Fleet while we were watching. And we still don't understand how they did it. Every piece of wreckage we've analyzed shows signs of technology we can't replicate. They're not just fighting us. They're fighting in ways we can't predict or counter. Another commander, a being that resembled flowing liquid metal, spoke up. What does intelligence say about Earth's military infrastructure? Surely they must have massive industrial complexes, orbital shipyards, resource extraction operations across their solar system? Torvin manipulated the display to show surveillance images of Earth's solar system. That's the other mystery. We can't find their military infrastructure. Earth itself has cities, conventional technology, but nothing that suggests they could build the weapons we encountered. They have some orbital stations and a small lunar base, but nowhere near enough industrial capacity to support what we saw. Then where are they building their weapons? Braxis demanded. We don't know. Our surveillance systems can't locate their shipyards or manufacturing centers. Either they're hidden in ways we can't detect, or they're somewhere we haven't thought to look. Kellis pulsed with realization. Or they're building them in ways that don't require traditional infrastructure. If they can manipulate quantum mechanics the way you describe, they might be assembling weapons at the atomic level, or pulling them from parallel dimensions, or using methods we can't even theorize. The implications settled over the war room like a heavy blanket. They were facing an enemy they didn't understand, using technology they couldn't explain, operating under principles they couldn't predict. Every advantage the collective had relied upon for 100,000 years suddenly seemed useless. There's one more thing, Torvin said, his voice barely above a whisper. Before the battle ended, we received a transmission from Earth. It wasn't encrypted. It wasn't hidden. They broadcast it on every frequency we monitor, making sure we couldn't miss it. He played the message. A human voice, calm and clear, spoke in perfectly translated Galactic Standard. This is Commander Rachel Torres of Earth Defense Command. You came to our world with threats and demands. You tried to enslave our species. You sent your mightiest fleet to force our submission. We have demonstrated what happens when you threaten humanity. This is your only warning. Leave us alone, or we will do to every fleet you send what we did to this one. We are not interested in joining your collective. We are not interested in your empire. We want only to be left in peace. But if you force us to fight, we will show you what a species that has spent its entire existence perfecting the art of warfare can really do. The choice is yours. Choose wisely." The message ended. The war room remained silent for a long moment. Finally, Braxis spoke. "What do we do?" Torvin looked around at the assembled commanders. These warriors and strategists who had conquered countless worlds and maintained the collective's dominance for millennia. "I don't know. For the first time in my career, I genuinely don't know. We're facing something completely outside our experience. A species that should be insignificant has just humiliated our most powerful fleet. And they did it while holding back, while sending a message, while making sure we understood they could have done far worse. The Arbiter will demand retaliation," Callis said. "The Council cannot allow this challenge to stand." "Then the Council is going to learn what happens when pride overrides wisdom," Torvin replied. "Because I've seen what the humans can do when they're trying to be merciful. I have no desire to find out what they can do when they're trying to win." The Arbiter stood alone in its private chamber, surrounded by holographic displays showing data streams from across the galaxy. For the first time in its 3 million-year existence, it felt something it barely recognized: fear. The displays flickered and died. When they returned, they showed something that should have been impossible: a human face appearing on Ever. Y screen simultaneously. The woman looked middle-aged by human standards, with gray streaking through dark hair and eyes that held the weight of difficult decisions. "My name is Director Elena Cross," the woman said. "I command Earth's Strategic Intelligence Division. I think it's time we had an honest conversation." The Arbiter's security system screamed warnings. This transmission was coming from inside the Collective's most secure network, bypassing every protection, every firewall, every quantum encryption protocol that had kept the Empire safe for millennia. "How are you doing this?" the Arbiter demanded. "Does it matter?" Elena asked. "You sent assassins to Earth. They failed. You sent infiltrators to our cities. We captured them. You tried to destabilize our governments with propaganda and economic manipulation. We turned your agents and fed you false information for 6 months. You sent your fleet to intimidate us. We destroyed it. At what point do you accept that you're not dealing with a primitive species? You have no right to access these systems?" Elena's expression didn't change. "You had no right to try enslaving my species. Yet here we are. The difference is I'm offering you a way out of this situation. The question is whether you're smart enough to take it." The Arbiter's form shifted through several states of matter as it processed the situation. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand reality. Your empire is built on a foundation of lies and fear. You've conquered species not through superior technology but through information control and overwhelming force. You make everyone believe you're invincible, and that belief becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But we've looked behind the curtain. We've seen how the machinery actually works. And we're not impressed." She pulled up data on her own displays. 40,000 worlds in your collective. Sounds impressive until you realize that 32,000 of them are vassal states with no real autonomy. They provide resources and labor in exchange for protection from threats you often created. 8,000 worlds have tried to leave the collective in the past 10,000 years. You've crushed every single rebellion. Not through negotiation or compromise, but through genocide. "We maintain order," the Arbiter said coldly. "Without the collective, the galaxy would descend into chaos." "No," Elena replied. "Without the collective, the galaxy would have freedom. There's a difference. You've convinced yourselves that your empire is necessary because you can't imagine what the alternative would look like. But we can. We've seen what happens when people are actually free to make their own choices. Sometimes they make mistakes. Sometimes they go to war. But they also innovate, create, and grow in ways your controlled society never could." The Arbiter gestured dismissively. "Philosophy. You speak of ideals while ignoring practical realities. The strong will always dominate the weak. We simply organized that inevitable truth into a stable system. That's where you're wrong, Elena said. The strong dominate until the weak become strong enough to fight back. And humanity just became strong enough. She pulled up new data. Battle simulations, tactical analyses, strategic projections. You're trying to figure out how we defeated your fleet. Your admirals are studying the engagement, looking for weaknesses in our approach, ways to counter our tactics. But you're asking the wrong questions. You want to know how we did it. The real question is why we could do it when no other species in your empire ever has. Then enlighten me. Because we're not bound by your assumptions, Elena explained. Your technology is advanced, yes, but it's also stagnant. You haven't had real innovation in 50,000 years because you haven't needed it. Every species that joins your collective adopts your methods, your thinking, your limitations. You've created a galaxy-wide monoculture. But humanity developed in isolation. We didn't know your rules, so we never learned your limitations. She pulled up images of human technology. You see primitive weapons. We see tools we've refined through constant warfare. You see inefficient designs. We see systems built to function when everything else has failed. Your ships are marvels of engineering, but they're also fragile. Disable the right systems, and they're helpless. Our technology is crude by your standards, but it's robust. It's built by a species that assumes everything will go wrong and plans accordingly. The Arbiter studied the images. You cannot hope to stand against the full might of the collective. You destroyed one fleet. We have thousands. And we've already compromised your command and control systems, Elena countered. Right now, I could send orders to any fleet in your empire, and they would execute them believing they came from you. I could turn your entire military against itself. I could crash your economy by manipulating your financial networks. I could incite rebellions on 1,000 worlds by revealing the truth about your empire. I could do all of this right now while we're having this conversation. Then why don't you? Elena leaned forward. Because unlike you, we're not interested in empire. We don't want to conquer the galaxy. We don't want to rule over other species. We just want to be left alone. But if you force our hand, we will bring your entire civilization down around your ears. Not because we hate you, but because we refuse to be slaves. The Arbiter was silent for a long moment. You could be bluffing. I could be, Elena agreed. There's one way to find out. Send another fleet. Try again to force us into your collective. See what happens, or accept reality. Earth is not joining your empire. Humanity will develop on our own terms. You will remove all surveillance from our system, recall all your agents from our world, and leave us alone. In exchange, we won't destroy everything you've built. The Arbiter's form flickered with barely contained rage. No species dictates terms to the collective. Then we're about to set a new precedent, Elena replied calmly. You have 48 hours to remove all collective presence from our solar system. After that, we start releasing information. First, we'll send evidence of your crimes to every vassal world in your empire. Let them see what you've really been doing. Then we'll crash your military command network. Your fleets will be blind, unable to coordinate or respond to threats. Finally, we'll open your quantum communication channels to everyone. No more secrets. No more control. Just chaos as thousands of worlds realize they don't need you anymore. You would destabilize the entire galaxy. Billions would die in the resulting wars. Then don't make us do it, Elena said. You claim to maintain order. Prove it. Show the galaxy you can accept one species choosing independence without trying to crush them. Or prove that your empire is exactly what we say it is. A tyranny maintained through fear that will burn itself down rather than accept any challenge to its authority. The Arbiter stared at the human on the screen. This species that should have been insignificant, that should have been grateful for the chance to join the collective, had somehow become the greatest threat the Empire had ever faced. Why did you really contact me directly? The Arbiter asked. You could have simply released your information and watched us fall. Why give me this warning? Elena's expression softened slightly. Because I've studied your history. Before the collective, your species was explorers. You mapped the galaxy out of curiosity, not conquest. Somewhere along the way, you forgot that. You became the thing you once would have opposed. I'm giving you the chance to remember who you were before you became what you are. And if I refuse, then we go to war. A real war. Not the one-sided conquest you're used to, but a genuine conflict between equals. And I promise you, you don't want that. Because humanity has been practicing warfare for its entire existence. And we're very good at it. The transmission ended, leaving the Arbiter alone with its thoughts and its fear, 3 star systems away. The collective Second Fleet prepared for deployment. 2,000 vessels, the largest concentration of military power in galactic history, assembled to crush the human rebellion once and for all. Fleet Marshal Dravik stood on the bridge of his flagship, reviewing the battle plans with confidence. The humans had surprised the Fourth Fleet, yes, but that was a fluke. Superior numbers and overwhelming firepower would prevail. His confidence lasted until the moment his tactical officer reported that their quantum communication network had just transmitted new orders to the entire fleet. Orders that Dravik hadn't sent. Orders that were routing every ship to different destinations across the galaxy, scattering the fleet before it could even engage the enemy. By the time Dravik regained control of his systems, half his fleet was scattered across a dozen star systems. The other half reported that their weapon systems were locked. Their targeting computers were displaying contradictory data, and their navigation systems were routing them toward collision courses with each other. Dravik stared at his screens in horror as he realized that the Second Fleet had been defeated without the humans firing a single shot. They had simply reached into the collective's most secure systems and torn the fleet apart from the inside. The message arrived moments later, displayed on every screen in the fleet. This is Commander Torres of Earth Defense Command. You have 36 hours to withdraw all collective forces from human space. This is your final warning. Choose wisely. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chaos. Delegates shouted across the chamber in hundreds of languages, their translation matrices struggling to keep up. The holographic displays surrounding the assembly showed catastrophic news from across the Empire. Rebellions erupting on 17 worlds. Communication networks failing in entire sectors. Fleet commanders reporting they had lost contact with Central Command. The Arbiter materialized at the central platform, its form flickering with barely controlled energy. Silence. The word rippled through the chamber with physical force. Delegates fell quiet, turning to face their leader. The humans have made their move, the Arbiter announced. They have released classified information to every vassal world in the collective. Evidence of resource exploitation, forced genetic modification, suppressed rebellions, and manufactured threats. They have also compromised our military command network. Our fleets are currently scattered across the galaxy, unable to coordinate or respond to threats. A delegate from the Vorten assembly rose, its gas form swirling with agitation. How is this possible? Our systems were designed to be impenetrable. Clearly they were not, the Arbiter replied bitterly. The humans have demonstrated capabilities far beyond what we believed possible for a species of their development level. They have been inside our networks for months, learning our systems, mapping our infrastructure, and waiting for the right moment to strike. Then we destroy Earth, snarled Representative Crane of the warrior clans. We glass their planet from orbit. We show the galaxy what happens to species that defy the collective. With what fleet? The question came from Intelligence Director Malthus, a being whose species existed partially in higher dimensions. The Second Fleet was disabled before it could reach human space. The Fourth Fleet was destroyed. The Third and Seventh Fleets are scattered across 24 star systems. The humans didn't just attack us. They decapitated our ability to respond. The chamber erupted again. Some delegates demanded immediate retaliation. Others called for negotiation. A few, seeing which way the stars were aligning, began quietly distancing themselves from the collective's leadership, Then every display in the chamber went dark. When they lit again, they showed a human woman. Director Cross stood before what appeared to be a command center on Earth, surrounded by holographic displays showing data from across the galaxy. "Good evening. Representatives of the Galactic Collective," Elena said calmly. "I apologize for the intrusion, but you've been ignoring our communications. I thought it was time we addressed the entire council directly." "This is an outrage," the Arbiter shouted. "You have no authority to address this body." "And yet here I am," Elena replied. "Broadcasting on every channel you possess, appearing on every screen in your chamber. If you want to talk about authority, let's discuss how you claimed authority over humanity without our consent. But we can have that philosophical debate later. Right now, I'm here to offer you all a choice." She gestured, and the displays changed to show tactical data. Fleet positions, defense networks, command and control systems. Everything laid bare. This is the current state of your military, scattered, confused, unable to coordinate. I want you to understand something very clearly. We didn't do this because we're cruel or because we want to conquer you. We did this to prove a point. Everything you believed made you invincible was an illusion. Your quantum encryption? We broke it. Your reality anchors? We turned them into weapons. Your vast military superiority? It means nothing when we can disable your fleets faster than you can deploy them. Delegate Thorvin of the Science Consortium spoke, its mechanical voice calm despite the circumstances. "What do you want, Director Cross?" "What we've wanted from the beginning. To be left alone. But since you seem incapable of granting that simple request, we're offering a new arrangement. We've unlocked your communications network. Every vassal world in your empire now has access to the truth. They know about the exploitation, the manipulation, the lies. Many of them are already preparing to leave the collective. You've doomed billions." Someone shouted. "Without the collective's protection, those worlds will tear each other apart." "Maybe," Elena agreed. "Or maybe they'll surprise you. Maybe they'll form alliances, trade agreements, mutual defense pacts. Maybe they'll build something better than your empire of fear. But that's their choice to make, not yours." She pulled up new data. "However, we understand that a complete collapse of galactic civilization serves no one's interests. So here's what's going to happen. The collective will dissolve as a governing body. It will transition into a voluntary association of worlds. No forced integration. No mandatory technology sharing. No genetic modification requirements. Just a network of civilizations that choose to work together." "Impossible," the Arbiter said flatly. "The galaxy needs order. Without central authority, there will be chaos." "There will be freedom," Elena corrected. "And yes, probably some chaos too. But that's how civilization actually develops. Through trial and error, success and failure, not through top-down control that prevents any real growth." "Why should we accept this?" asked Representative Vex of the Commerce Guild. "You've demonstrated you can damage our infrastructure, yes. But you're one species on one planet. We are thousands of civilizations. Eventually, we will overcome your tricks and reassert control." Elena smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "You're welcome to try. But let me show you something." The displays shifted again. This time they showed human ships. Not the small vessels that had destroyed the Fourth Fleet, but massive construction vessels. Dozens of them, working in the asteroid belt of Earth's solar system. This is what we've been building while you were focused on trying to conquer us. These are construction platforms capable of assembling military vessels at a rate of 50 per day. We've been operating them at minimal capacity, just enough to defend our system. But if you force us to go to total war production, we can build faster than you can destroy. And every ship we build incorporates technology specifically designed to counter yours." She zoomed in on one of the vessels. "This is the Defiant. It's the first of a new class of warship we've designated as fleet killers. Each one carries weapons that can disable an entire battle group simultaneously. We currently have 12 operational. By the end of the month, we'll have 100. By the end of the year, we'll have enough to match your entire military. You're threatening us with annihilation, Malthus said quietly. No, Elena replied. I'm showing you the cost of trying to maintain your empire through force. You can attempt to crush us, and maybe you'll eventually succeed. But the price will be the complete destruction of your military, the collapse of your economy, and the dissolution of your empire. Or you can accept the new reality. Humanity is free, and so is any other species that chooses to be. The Arbiter's form solidified into something sharp and threatening. This is blackmail. This is diplomacy, Elena countered. We're offering you a way to maintain stability while transitioning to a more equitable system. The alternative is war, and I promise you that war will cost more than you're willing to pay. She paused, letting her words sink in. I've uploaded a proposal to your systems. It outlines a transition process. The collective becomes a voluntary federation. Current vassal worlds are given the choice to remain or leave. Military forces are reduced and reorganized into a mutual defense fleet. Trade agreements are renegotiated on fair terms. It won't be easy, and it won't be quick, but it's the path forward that doesn't end in galactic civil war. And if we refuse? The Arbiter asked. Then we start releasing more information. Every dirty secret, every crime, every manipulation. We crash your economy by revealing the real value of your currency. We disable your military infrastructure completely, not just temporarily. We arm every rebel group, every independence movement, every species that's ever dreamed of freedom. And we sit back and watch your empire tear itself apart? Elena's expression softened slightly. But I hope you don't refuse. Because despite everything, I believe you built the collective with good intentions. You wanted to prevent war, to create stability, to protect weaker species. Those are admirable goals. The problem is, you forgot that the species you were protecting had their own desires, their own dreams, their own right to self-determination. We're offering you the chance to remember that. The transmission ended. The council chamber remained silent for a long moment. Finally, delegate after delegate began to speak. Some advocated for continued resistance, but more and more voices called for acceptance. They had seen the evidence. They understood the reality. Humanity had outmaneuvered them completely, and continuing to fight would only accelerate the Empire's collapse. The Arbiter listened to its council divide before its eyes and realized that Elena Cross had been right. The collective had already lost. The only question was whether they would accept defeat with dignity or force humanity to destroy them completely. In a chamber on Earth, Elena Cross watched the council debate and allowed herself a small smile. It had been a gamble. Everything she had shown them was real, but humanity's resources were stretched far thinner than she had admitted. If the collective called their bluff and committed everything to crushing Earth, the outcome would be uncertain at best, but they wouldn't. Because she had understood something fundamental about them. They were bullies, accustomed to easy victories over species too frightened to fight back. Now that they faced an opponent willing and able to hurt them, all their confidence had evaporated. Humanity had won its freedom not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through being willing to do what the collective could not imagine. They had made the Empire's leaders afraid, 3 years after humanity's ultimatum. Ambassador Marcus Webb stood in what had once been called the Grand Assembly Hall, but was now simply known as the Federation Chamber. The space had not changed physically, but everything else about it was different. Where once the Arbiter had loomed over delegates from a position of absolute authority, now there was a round table where representatives sat as equals. Where once species had been forced to attend or face consequences, now attendance was voluntary. Where once decisions had been handed down from above, now they were debated, voted upon, and implemented only with consensus. Marcus took his seat among the other ambassadors. To his left sat Representative Crane, the warrior who had once demanded Earth's destruction and now served as humanity's most unlikely ally. To his right was Delegate Vex, who had turned the Commerce Guild from an instrument of exploitation into a genuine trade network. The meeting began with routine matters. trade disputes between the Vexor Republic and the Thrain Confederacy, resource-sharing agreements in the Outer Rim territories, requests for technical assistance from newly independent worlds, still learning to govern themselves. Then came the matter everyone had been anticipating. The Arbiter species, the progenitors, had requested admission to the new Federation. After 3 years of isolation, they wanted to rejoin galactic civilization. The Arbiter itself materialized at the center of the chamber. Its form was more subdued now, less imposing. Age and defeat had changed it in ways that were visible even to species who barely understood its biology. "I come before this assembly to make a request on behalf of my people," the Arbiter began. The progenitors wished to join the Federation as equal members, subject to the same rules and obligations as every other species. Silence filled the chamber. The being that had once commanded an empire now stood as a supplicant, requesting acceptance rather than demanding submission. Marcus stood. The progenitors built the collective. For 100,000 years they maintained order through force and manipulation. Why should we trust them now? The Arbiter met his gaze directly. You should not. Trust must be earned, and we have not earned it. But I ask that you give my species the opportunity to prove we have learned from our mistakes. We were conquerors. We believed our way was the only way. We crushed dissent and called it peace. You showed us the cost of that approach. You dismantled our empire not through conquest but by revealing the truth. You gave the galaxy freedom, and in doing so you gave us perspective we had lost millennia ago. It gestured around the chamber. Look at what has been built in 3 years. Hundreds of worlds working together voluntarily, accomplishing more than we achieved through forced cooperation. New technologies emerging from species we had suppressed. Art, culture, and ideas flowing freely across the galaxy. This is what we prevented with our control. This is what we denied the universe. Crane stood, his massive form drawing all eyes. 3 years ago, I wanted to destroy humanity. I saw you as a threat to everything I believed in. But I was wrong. The collective taught me that strength was everything, that order justified any cost. Humanity taught me that freedom is stronger than force, that choice creates loyalty that fear never can. If I could learn this lesson, so can the progenitors. Other delegates rose to speak. Some voiced support. Others expressed concerns. The debate stretched for hours, as it should when deciding the fate of a species that had shaped galactic history for so long. Finally, the vote was called. It was not unanimous. Some species still harbored too much resentment, too many memories of oppression. But enough voted in favor that the motion passed. The progenitors would be admitted to the Federation with one condition. They would serve a probationary period, during which their actions would be closely monitored. The Arbiter bowed its head in acceptance. Thank you. We will prove ourselves worthy of this second chance. After the session ended, Marcus found the Arbiter waiting for him outside the chamber. They walked together through corridors that now bustled with delegates from hundreds of species, all engaged in the messy, complicated, beautiful process of building something new. I have a question, the Arbiter said. One that has troubled me for 3 years. Ask your Director Cross the threats she made, the capabilities she claimed humanity possessed. How much of it was real? Marcus smiled. Enough to make you believe all of it. That's all that mattered. You were bluffing. We were negotiating from a position of strength we had carefully constructed. Some of our capabilities were exactly as advertised. Others were exaggerated. A few were complete fabrications that we sold through confidence and careful information control. You taught us well, actually. Everything you did to maintain the collective's power, we studied and adapted. The Arbiter made a sound that might have been laughter. We created our own downfall by teaching others our methods. Not downfall, Marcus corrected. Transformation. The collective fell, yes, but the progenitors survived. You're here negotiating your place in a new galaxy? That's more than most fallen empires manage. They reached a viewing platform that looked out over the planet below. The world had once been the collective's administrative center. Now it hosted the Federation's headquarters, neutral ground where all species could meet as equals. What happens now? The Arbiter asked. You freed the galaxy from authoritarian control. But freedom brings its own challenges. Wars will come. Some species will abuse their independence. There will be conflicts that the old collective would have prevented through force. Yes, Marcus agreed. There will be problems. Some of them serious. But they'll be problems people choose for themselves, not problems imposed upon them. And when those conflicts arise, we'll deal with them together. Not through force, but through negotiation, mediation, and compromise. It won't be perfect. It won't even be easy. But it will be genuine. You have remarkable faith in this system. I have faith in people's ability to learn and grow when given the chance. The collective prevented that growth. You created stability by suppressing change. But change is how civilizations advance. Sometimes painfully, sometimes at great cost, but always moving forward. The Arbiter was quiet for a moment. I was old when your species discovered fire. I have seen empires rise and fall across countless millennia. I believed I had learned everything there was to know about governance and power. Then your species appeared and proved me wrong. That is perhaps the most humbling experience of my existence. You built something that lasted 100,000 years, Marcus said. That's an achievement few can claim. The fact that it needed to end doesn't diminish what you accomplished. You created order from chaos. You preserved knowledge. You connected the galaxy. Those things mattered, even if the cost was too high. Generous words from someone whose species I tried to enslave. Marcus shrugged. Holding grudges is counterproductive. We won, you lost. Now we all have to figure out how to live together. Seems more useful to focus on building the future than dwelling on the past. They stood together in silence, watching ships come and go from the planet below. Human vessels mixed with progenitor craft, Korthian transports, Vashtari merchant ships, and hundreds of other designs from species across the galaxy. All moving freely, choosing their own paths, building their own futures. I have one more question, the Arbiter said. What will humanity do now? You've won your freedom and reshaped the galaxy? What comes next for Earth? Marcus considered the question. We explore. We learn. We trade with anyone who wants to trade with us. We defend ourselves if threatened, but seek no conquests. We share what we know and learn from others. Basically, we do what we've always wanted to do. We chart our own course and see where it leads. No grand ambitions? No desire to replace the collective as the dominant power? We've seen what pursuing dominance does to species. It corrupts them, turns them into the very thing they once opposed. We'd rather be one voice among many than the only voice that matters. The Arbiter's form shifted, reflecting something that might have been approval or perhaps relief. Perhaps there is hope for this new galaxy after all. Marcus smiled. There always was. You just had to stop controlling everything long enough to see it. Years later, historians would study this period as the Great Transition. They would analyze the diplomatic maneuvering, the technological revelations, and the fundamental reshaping of galactic civilization. They would debate whether humanity's approach had been genius or recklessness, whether the price of freedom had been worth the chaos that followed, but for the species living through it, the transition meant something simpler and more profound. It meant choice. The ability to determine their own fates, to make their own mistakes, to celebrate their own triumphs. Some worlds thrived in the new system. Others struggled. A few failed entirely and had to rebuild from naught. But they were all free. And that made all the difference. On Earth, director Elena Cross retired from active service. She had spent 3 years managing the delicate balance between maintaining humanity's defensive capabilities and building genuine relationships with other species. Now she stood in her garden, watching the sunset over mountains that had seen the rise and fall of countless human civilizations. Her successor, a young intelligence officer named David Park, sat beside her reviewing reports. The Nexus Compact is requesting technical assistance with their defense network, he said. The Vorthan Alliance wants to establish an embassy on Earth, and we have 17 requests for human advisors to help other species transition to democratic governance. Elena smiled. 3 years ago, the galaxy wanted to enslave us. Now they're asking for our help? Funny how things change. Do you think it will last? This new federation? No idea, Elena admitted. Maybe it collapses in a decade? Maybe it evolves into something even better. Maybe some new threat emerges that forces everyone to choose between freedom and survival. But that's not our problem to solve anymore. We did our part. We broke the chains. What people do with their freedom is up to them. She looked up at the stars where human ships now traveled freely among thousands of other species. Where once those lights had represented potential threats, now they represented possibilities. Friends to be made, knowledge to be gained, futures to be built? We won, she said quietly. Not because we were stronger or smarter or more advanced. We won because we were willing to fight for something the galaxy had forgotten was worth fighting for. The right to choose our own path. And in fighting for our freedom, we gave that right back to everyone else. David nodded. And now? Now we see what happens when the galaxy is actually free. Should be interesting. Above them, the stars shone with the light of countless worlds, each one now free to write its own story. Some would be tales of triumph, others of tragedy. But all would be genuine, unchosen, and ultimately more meaningful than anything the collective had ever imposed. Humanity had declared war on an empire and won not through conquest but through liberation. They had wiped out civilizations not by destroying them but by freeing them from the chains. They had forgotten they wore. And in doing so, they had proven that the strongest force in the universe was not technology or military might or even unity itself. It was the simple, stubborn refusal to accept slavery, no matter how benevolent it claimed to be.